Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Hey, it's so good to have you on Life Support. What we do in this podcast is we like to tell stories. We like to talk about difficult things of life and how Jesus enters into those spaces and can really change people. And we're excited to share stories with you. And we have a great story to share today. My guest is Edith Perlin, and Edith has quite a story to tell, a story of redemption, and amazing story of what she's doing right now. And Edith, it's so good to have you here. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you.
So, where does your story begin? You've got, this thing going now called Edith's House. We want to make sure we talk a lot about that. But did you grow up in this area, in the Twin Cities?
No, I grew up in the projects in Chicago, Illinois.
Okay. And so take me from there. How did your life begin to transpire from there?
Well, I grew up in a dysfunctional childhood. And as I grew, my life spiraled downhill. My mother was an alcoholic. My dad was a drug addict. And church wasn't talked about in my household. So by the time I became a teenager, I got pregnant at 16. I was ashamed in high school, and I dropped out. At that point, I started drinking and doing drugs, and my life spiraled out of control. By the time I was 31, I had 3 children. The system had taken them, and child protection, and I was facing life in prison.
Wow. So you were in one of those places where it looked hopeless. Huh?
Yeah.
Now, how do you get out from under that, right? You must have been thinking.
I had some suicide moments.
Yeah.
And I had to go to prison.
Mm-hmm. So you were only in your 31 years old, still a young woman. What did it feel like to be looking at a lifetime in prison?
Well, first of all, I didn't have no knowledge of God's love for me. I actually thought that people in the Bible were perfect and that I had messed up and that he was mad at me. And so that's what had drove me to want to just kill myself, And then I remember a sponsor from Narcotics Anonymous said, Edith, the disciples go in and out of jail all the time. You need to read your Bible. And I read my Bible, and when I discovered that God loved me and he wasn't mad at me, God, I dived in with both feet.
Wow. And then what happened?
And I had I had to go into prison to do life. I was sentenced to 15 to life in 2002, and I went in, and at that point I got my life saved. I got saved and baptized, and I went into prison. I was still had suicide thoughts, and then I went straight to the church because I knew that they had told me God loved me, and I experienced his love waiting and waiting to go in. And when I went in and went into the church, he kind of raised me, I would say, in prison. I did 13 and a half years in federal prison.
Mm-hmm. So did you come to know him through a prison ministry? Is that how you started to read your Bible?
Yes, I was in the church, and during the Bible studies, I hung with the Christians. And I would say that I started experiencing God's love through other people, them showing me I wanted to lead and didn't even know how to follow. So I was getting on everybody's nerve at the beginning, a baby in Christ. Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of a wonderful stage too, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I learned how to love unlovely people in federal prison, people from all over the world. And that was the best thing that I that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me in prison, is learning how to love God's way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the vast majority of people listening would not really be able to identify what it's like to be in prison. So it's difficult for them to have empathy for what it's like to be there. Just describe briefly, what it's like to be in a place like that for an extended period of time. What does that do to you as a person?
So you learn to live on 2 blocks. I lived in 2-block range for 13 and a half years. I lived in a room with 3 other women, and we had to walk sideways to get by. It was that small. Mm-hmm. And I worked 40 hours a week, making $5.75 a month.
Wow.
So I learned how to enjoy the simple things of life.
Yeah.
Everything was a line. Everything was waiting. And believe it or not, I was in there during the Obama era, and it was really bad. Him being black and the president, and we kind of felt it,
Yeah.
Everybody that shoveled snow was black
Right.
in the February month. So
Right.
it was just horrible. It was a horrible experience, but I remember the peace that I could get if I just kept reading my Bible and talking to the Lord.
Wow, that's really neat. So here you are now, you're 13 and a half years, then it came time to be released, right? And what was that like to have to try to make the transition from all those years in 2 blocks, as you put it, into real life? How hard was that?
So remember when I got out, I was afraid. I remember the fear that overtook me, and it was so noisy. It just seemed like the world was too big. I was not ready. I remember my probation officer saying, "Edith, just take as much time as you need to find a job." And then when my first bus ride, I remember seeing everybody looking at their phone, and I'm thinking, nobody's looking up. The cell phones wasn't in when I went in.
Yeah.
And everybody was looking at their phones. It was a train going down the middle of the streets, and it was just horrible for me. When I got out, I was afraid. I remember the fear.
Mm-hmm. So you were all by yourself?
Yes.
Trying to make a way?
I had a choice to go to my family's house, but at that point, when I went in, I didn't have anybody in my family in church. Everybody was drugging and drinking and partying. And so I was afraid to go to my family's because I didn't know what to expect. So I went to the halfway house, and I had to find my way. They have the flyers on the wall and everything, and I just kind of had to find my way. So I went back to the church. I ran to the church. And
how did you find a church? How did you decide where to go to church?
Well, there was a church that baptized me before I went in.
I see. So you already had those contacts at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually cut everybody off when I went in because I thought I was going to do life. And then I found that church and went back to that church. And I told them that actually when I went in, it was probably one homeless person per city on a corner. And when I got out, it was a homeless person on every corner in every city. And so I was, when I seen the extreme volume of homeless people, I was really, really sad to see that. And I talked to my pastor. I said, I really want to help the homeless people. God had gave me the heart for them right away when I seen them. And he announced it on the microphone and in church that I wanted to help the homeless. And they kind of came after me after the service and said, hey, let's sit down and have coffee and talk about what you want. And
well, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Because the world, that was very much of a transitional time, too. There were a lot of things changing in America and in our cities during that time you were in prison, and then you come out and, wow, a brave new world faced you. And that's got to be very, very, like, having never experienced that, that must be not only terrifying because you're by yourself and you have to figure out what you're going to do next, but how do I navigate this strange world, right? I mean, it must have just seemed like a foreign country.
Yeah. And I thank the Lord for the church, because I ran to the church because, one, I didn't want to go back to the same thing I had just came from.
Yeah.
And where God brought me from, and I went to the church, and they were white. I was the only black person at that church. Mm-hmm. And I knew that they probably didn't know a lot about where I came from and different things like that, but it was a more quiet. They had this love, this like overwhelming love to help me get on my feet. So that was very helpful. And then I went back to some of the resources that helped me get started before, get to turn myself in. Some of the ones that helped me at the beginning.
Right.
So, yeah.
So we think about prison. We think a lot about men in prison. There's a lot of movies with, men in prison escaping and prison life for men, but we don't always think of women that are in prison. What kinds of things did you face from society? How they felt about you or how they saw you as you tried to get your life back together and move forward? My felony right away. I couldn't get a job right away. I couldn't get into housing. Because every application you fill out, you have to answer that question,
yep.
Right?
Are you a felon?
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in there, this last, I believe, 10, 12 years, that was taken out through the whole government thing, that question. But, yeah, when I got out, it was horribly hard to get a job and to get housing and to even get help. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't a good era when I got out. Mm-hmm. And so, like I say, I went and I was determined not to do food stamps anymore, and I wanted to pay taxes. Those were two things that's taxes was a really big thing for me. I've never paid taxes, and I want to pay taxes. And so I settled for...
Well, you're living in the right state to pay taxes.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Minnesota. And so, yeah, my brother helped me get a car, helped me get my license back, and he helped me get a car. And I applied for Uber, and I slipped through the cracks with my background, and they hired me. So
Is that right?
I was able to earn a living with Uber for about a year and a half.
Good for you. So that was just like determination.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you had a lot of inner drive going there. I'm going to make something of myself, huh?
Yep, and you know what? And more than anything, I wanted to help the homeless people. So the Uber was good because I could work at my own pace. So I was still able to go out and pray for them and ask them what happened. That was as much as I knew how to do at that point. Yeah.
Right, and this was in Chicago still?
No, this was
here
now.
How did you end up going from Chicago to the Twin Cities? Okay,
so I was a rape victim, okay, and I was running from domestic violence, and I was pregnant from a rape, and I didn't want him to find out it wasn't his daughter, so I left and came to Minnesota, and that was in 1990. And so I've been here since 1990, and so...
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was by necessity, but God obviously had a purpose in you being here, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. When I look back over my life, if it had not been for the Lord, He was with me the whole time.
Yeah.
But there was quite a few times I've overdosed before on drugs, and I've been through a lot, and the Lord has kept me, and now He's sent me back to where He brought me from.
Yeah. Well, I wish the people that are listening on the radio could see you, because you have a wonderful smile and you have obviously been reborn, and and are full of joy. And now you have this thing called Edith's house. So tell me what that's all about.
Okay, so the church that I told you announced it in 2017 that I wanted to help the homeless people. By 2019, they decided to get a 501c3. I had told them, I said, let's just call it Edith's house. And we got a 501c3, and we did a fundraiser, and we bought a house. And I got my first paycheck in 2020.
Wow, not very long ago.
Yeah.
Just right about COVID, right about the pandemic, right?
The pandemic hit right in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
And, well, actually, the George Floyd kind of came in the middle of the year. Mm-hmm. But, yeah. And so we, I don't know, we got the county funding now. The house is paid off now. And I've housed hundreds of people.
What kind of people? Who are you helping with that?
Individuals and families experiencing homelessness.
I see.
In this past year, I've watched over 18 people get saved and baptized.
Wow. How about
from that community. Yeah.
Wow, good for you. That's amazing.
Yep.
That's really exciting. Congratulations.
Yep, and the county gave us funding, started in October of 2022. They gave us $150,000 to hire a staff and house 18 people, and I've already housed 26 in this March of 23. Isn't that good?
Yeah, that's really good.
I know.
You have a lot going on. You have a lot going on, but that's really cool. So homelessness in America right now just seems to be a terrible epidemic. I know how you're coping with homelessness. You're trying to do your part, and you are. But how is society going to deal with this problem, do you think? Because it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Well, like you say, shelter is a high demand. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I can say to that is that we just have to keep trying to get the funding that we need to house people. The landlords are opening up their doors more. Mm-hmm. You know, they're renting rooms instead of the whole house, and they're just opening up. They need to build more, and focus more on the need, housing first.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a housing first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in a place like here in the northern part of the States, it's cold here. And it's cold a lot here. So I can imagine there's a tremendous need for people just to be in a safe place.
Yeah, during the pandemic, a lot of people died out there because they shut off the libraries where they hung out during the day and some of the spaces.
Everything was closed down.
Everything. Yeah. And they died. They were just finding them dead under the bridge, on the bus stop benches. A lot of people died.
Yeah.
And so, shelter is a high demand, and it's become a burden for me. But, I'm always in the presence of the Lord to try to help me to.
Right. Well, these are all people made in the image of God. They're all valuable to God.
Yes.
And maybe society has a level of value somehow that we've placed on people, but for God, everybody is valuable because He created them. And so it's tragic to hear stories like that people were left out and just left to die on their own many times, I'm sure. And I'm glad that you're at least helping the best you can. You're only one person, but you're doing a lot already.
Yeah.
What are some of your goals for the future? What would you like to do more of with what you're doing right now?
Okay, so we had a fundraiser this past October. And we wanted to raise $99,000 to pay off the house, and we wound up raising $194,000. So we paid off the house, hired a staff, and right now, a month ago, we were at the table with 40 unit that one of the board members had drew up, and we want to try to pray and believe God for the 40 unit, and we wanted to have I've thought that a community space at the bottom where people can have Narcotic Anonymous meetings, Bible studies, talk to their psychiatrists, psychologists, you know what I mean, parole officers, a space where they can have at the bottom, you know, a community.
Yeah.
And so that's the vision. The next vision for Ediths House is to get a bigger space, more beds, and house people, more people.
So here I'm talking to a person that at one point in your life, you're young, you're headed to prison, and now you're talking about visions and plans and dealing with a board, and I mean, wow, what a story of redemption you are. Does that ever strike you sometimes when you just think about how far you've come?
Oh my God, yes, because the prison part is just a small surface of I've been homeless, I've been strung out on drugs, I flee domestic violence. I mean, the list goes on. Child protection raised my children. I mean, I have a story, and that's the good thing, because I can share my story with the broken people in the world and share God's love and his story, you know, and that's what it means. It's priceless, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because people can talk about not believing the Bible, and they can talk about their own religious views, but one thing they cannot disown is your testimony. Your testimony is your testimony, and it's real, and God did real things. And so that I just keep sharing with as many people as you can. And it gives you a tremendous amount of credibility with the people you're trying to minister to, right? Because they know you've been there.
Yes.
And I bet you've had a few people that have looked at you and said, "How did you get out of this?" And you're able to tell them about Christ and how he changed your life.
Well, yeah, after I think I did 16 treatments, and I couldn't figure out how to stay stopped. And it was until I gave my life to Jesus, it changed forever. Isn't that good?
Yeah, it's really good. Well, you know, we're going to be right around Easter, and the resurrection of Christ changed everything, didn't it?
Yes.
And we can look at that, and we see our own lives changed by him as well. So how can someone find out more information about what you're doing at Ediths House and donate if they would like to?
So you go to www.edithshouse.org, and our website will come up, and it'll instruct you how to donate and volunteer and whatever else you want to know about it.
Fantastic. Edith, thank you so much for coming by and sharing your story.